There's every chance you hear the title to this video and think it sounds negative. When a wrestler refuses to lose, there's certainly a less than favourable fallout depending on the situation, but it was also done for one simple reason: wins matter. As opposed to today, where most critics of WWE claim that a victory or a defeat is irrelevant to the story, most stars in this list are from an era where protecting their character had a direct correlation on their success. If they lost too often, they became a loser. How the company has gone back on that in recent years is anybody's guess. Instead, it's about 50-50 booking or would-be title contenders just choking out the champion in order to get a shot at the belt. Forget the fact that doesn't really justify it. That's just the situation we find ourselves in. Been going the other way pleased everybody, but still. I'm Simon from WhatCulture. Smash that subscribe button. This is 10 wrestlers who hated losing. Number 10, Roddy Piper. Straight up, Hot Rod did not like to lose. Something he carried with him since his mid-Atlantic days right through to his star-making WWE run. Roddy Piper couldn't conceive of a world where he would lay down for anybody, because what would that have done for his character? It was such a big thing backstage that Hulk Hogan would even tease Roddy about this, saying if he changed his ways, not only would he have earned more money, but he could have had time as the champion. While that may have been true, especially because many people still say that Piper was one of the best wrestlers never to hold the gold, you can't really argue that during his pomp in the 80s it didn't work. Few were as consistently over as the Rowdy one, and refusing to tangle with Hogan stopped Hulkamania running all over his spot. We will never know how things would have been if he had changed his ways, but given that he's considered a legend, it's hard to say that he didn't make a lot of the right choices along the way. He believed in himself and never ever thought otherwise. Not even once. Number 9, Bruno Sammartino. An almost everyman figure that was beloved by all, Bruno Sammartino was able to not only bring communities together as they packed out Madison Square Garden to see him, but his humility shone through in the ring. This wasn't by accident. Before he ascended to the top, he was still telling promoters he didn't want to lose to the point he got blackballed. It took a few years plying his trade in Canada before he was welcomed back in the Northeast. Even then, Bruno stood firm. If somebody looked like they could beat him, fine, but otherwise everybody else could go do one. This came from his upbringing and probably was what allowed his character to shine through. His mother, for example, had kept the sickly Sammartino alive by evading Nazi forces in Italy. While his 4 siblings would pass away due to this, it was Bruno who got through to the other side before dedicating himself to the gym and to wrestling. Never again would we be in a similar position. Less of an egotist and more of someone who wouldn't lose to a frivolous idea. Much like many in this list, Sammartino's faith in himself paid dividends. Number 8, Bruiser Brody. Bruiser Brody was a maverick based on his fundamental dislike of wrestling promoters. Realizing how treacherous they could be, Brody pitched himself as an unhinged wild man and wouldn't shift that persona for anyone or anything. So good at this, people bought his shtick hook, line and sinker, and because of that, Bruiser was able to pick and choose who he lost to because no one would dare tell him otherwise. He lived the gimmick because he got it and it worked. You don't make someone who was nuts stare at the lights, but you'd also be foolish not to book him because he was such a draw. If you need some evidence, just look at when he clashed with Tonio Inoki. Even the Japanese legend couldn't convince people otherwise, and most of their brawls ended in a no contest. Result just added to Brody's aura. More of a brawler than a wrestler, his life was tragically cut short in one of the worst incidents in wrestling history, but still, not even that could stop fans remembering just how awesome he was. Number 7, The Ultimate Warrior. The Ultimate One didn't enjoy laying on his back. Probably more of a product of his era than anything else, getting him to do a job was harder than keeping Mojo Rawley on TV today. Have the best intentions, but it's probably not going to happen. Largely put down to the fact he was flung to the top as opposed to plying his trade over the years, Warrior reached the summit of WWE so quickly that he soon secured himself in his wrestling bunker and borrowed a page out of Hulk Hogan's book. If he was going to be defeated, there has to be some shenanigans, such as the Macho Man smashing him in the head with a raw scepter. If you need more evidence, just go back in time and see how little he lost clean on TV. Can actually count it on one hand. It is possible to see this both ways too. Was the fact that he dug his heels in good for keeping the idea of what the Ultimate Warrior was alive, or did it just stop other stars coming through and keep the wrestling production line ticking over? A controversial figure to say the least, it seems to be an argument that will never truly find an answer. Too many childhood memories tied up in it. Never forget that despite all the asterisks many fans will be keen to tell you about, the Warrior is still many people's favourite wrestler of all. Number 6, Tonio Inoki. The other reason why Bruiser Brody never got a clean win or loss over his Japanese foe is because Inoki himself was no fond of doing the JOB. fact, he held himself in such high regard that everyone bought into it to the point if you got a chop from the man, it was deemed a huge honor. He'd dine off that for a month. The founder of New Japan, which is always going to carry with it some credence, Inoki naturally gave himself a lot of leeway. His fans loved it because he was so close to the wrestling industry and was seen as a hero. All of this also came after the JWA had dissolved because Antonio had a desire to start something new. A genuine pioneer, Inoki simply felt like he deserved more, so he went and got it. He also didn't lose cleanly ever to a fellow native talent until December 1985, and that was when he was nearing the end of his in-ring career. The performer he selected for this crazy honor was Tatsumi Fujinami, and after he won with a Dragon Suplex in a tag team match that was deemed pretty damn important, it launched a whole new generation. In that sense, waiting this long did have a pretty significant payoff. If you want to break it right down, Inoki was basically the Japanese version of Super Cena, although he hit far harder. Number 5, The Undertaker. When The Undertaker first debuted, it made sense that he was protected. He was meant to be a dead man, and he had such a different feel to him, there was no way Taker could be treated like anybody else. To get the gimmick to work, you had to be terrified of him. Due to this, he sailed up the card and has remained a main event guy pretty much ever since, even when he became the American Badass. The issue with that run is that other than Jeff Hardy, no one else really got anything from working with him. Take Fully Loaded 2000. The idea on paper seemed to be to take 3 young guys, Kurt Angle, Chris Benoit and Chris Jericho, and get them over huge even though they would lose. Triple H and The Rock did their bit, but when it came to the Phenom tangling with the Olympic gold medalist, well, that one didn't go to plan. While they did have a match few could pick holes in, deciding to let Undertaker pull Angle's shoulders off the mat before the referee hit 3 ruined what we had set out to do. Now Kurt looked like just another geek. It was the same when Booger Red destroyed DDP 2 years later and ruined the Invasion storyline, and for a good while fans wanted to know why not only did Taker never lose, but he barely ever sold anybody else's offense. Some still call him the Underseller, no joke. There's no doubt he's a legend and has earned that right. It doesn't mean there weren't some blips along the way. Number 4, Triple H. The Reign of Terror, some called it, or the period where if Triple H had a world championship, few fans ever thought he would lose. The weird thing here is that there was a contingent of people who were behind the game regardless, but that didn't always mean what we were seeing on screen made sense. The time when Hunter beat both Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch, for example. Nobody else got to do that, and there were more eyebrows raised when rumours surfaced that the original plan was for Triple H to win by DQ, but then he went and got it changed. Trips won with a spine buster too. It was more how he treated others when they did beat him as well. When Jeff Hardy won at Armageddon 2007, Triple H came out of Raw and simply joked that every dog has his day. Oddly, Triple H's WrestleMania record is nowhere near as stellar, which could be why more often than not he has the longest match on that card. Give it the utmost importance, so even if the man with 3 H's is going down, there's some magic to the bout. Who would have thought in the mid-2000s it would be this man everybody pinned their hopes on as the future of the WWE? Just goes to show. Number 3, Steve Austin. This is where hypocrisy creeps into this list because let's face it was alright when Stone Cold didn't lose. In fact, fans hated it when he did. Throwing that he outdrew Hulk Hogan even after being brought into WWE at Repo Man level, and once he had this success, he didn't take it for granted. He saw himself as the man, and if he looked at any opponent and thought they weren't worthy of what his character had become, they were thrown out the door. Take Mark Merrow. Vince McMahon thought about having him as the Rattlesnake's first challenger post his debut world title win, but that was stopped. It was the same with Jeff Jarrett. If you weren't a headliner, Stone Cold didn't want to know. He wasn't precious with this either, because even Triple H felt this sting at SummerSlam 1999 when, apparently, Austin decided that losing to the game wasn't going to help his status as the guy to pull things forward. You couldn't prove to him that losing would benefit the bigger picture, he just wouldn't do it. Right down to walking out of the WWE after being told he'd be jobbing to Brock Lesnar. The thing is, it's hard to argue because look what it did. Stone Cold Steve Austin returned to TV with the Raw reunion in July 2019, and he's protected himself so much the crowd went nuts as soon as they heard that glass break. None of that was by accident. Number 2, Hulk Hogan. Very similar to Stone Cold, you could say. For some reason, Hulk Hogan doesn't get the same free pass. He would say his prayers, eat his vitamins, believe in himself, and if you were ever going to ask him to lose, just come back with, "That doesn't work for me, brother." It's a firm and fine strategy. The difference seems to be, whereas Austin would be swayed if you could prove that it was going to lead somewhere, the Hulkster just didn't want to know. It is said he was so worried about Jake Roberts getting over just by working with him that he wouldn't do it. went in the opposite direction. This changed at WrestleMania 6 when he did go down for the Ultimate Warrior, but as we all know, Hogan kicked out at 3.1 and sunk to his knees in despair. He was still very much alive and kicking and had lost by the smallest of margins. Somewhat ironically, Hulk and Austin discussed this on the latter's podcast in July 2019, where they both agreed it was the right thing to do. Debate it in the comments. Really though, it was just a way for Hogan to save face, and it was still going on in 2005 when a 3-match program with Shawn Michaels became one fight at SummerSlam because Hulk decided he didn't want to lose any of them. Speaking of which, number 1, Shawn Michaels. The really interesting part of the SummerSlam 2005 match between two legends was that Shawn Michaels thought he could outpolitic the Hulkster. Could not. HBK then used his own approach to negate that issue by overselling to a ludicrous degree as they clashed and he basically took the piss. One of the biggest matches ever, and one of the participants was mucking around. To be fair, it was hilarious, and it makes it essential rewatching today even though we're 14 years removed. It was also karma to a point. Michaels didn't drop any of his several belts in the traditional clean way until WrestleMania 14, which was 8 years after he debuted in the WWE. Sometimes he turned around and just went home. That's one way not to lose. It's part of wrestling lore now that this is the case, even if as time went on, Shawn did get far more cool with this. Still though, once it's happened, he did not like to get beat. Know of any other wrestlers who hated losing? Let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Then head over to WhatCulture.com and read yourself some articles, and follow WhatCulture on Twitter at WhatCulture WWE. My name is Simon from WhatCulture, and I'll talk to you again soon.